I am the Lord's servant. Okay, we're going to break that down. The Lord's servant. What is your role? That's the word that we want to put there. Role. I am the Lord's servant. What is your role in life? What is your role in the world? Are you the boss? Are you large and in charge? Or are you the servant of the Lord? That's a huge distinction. I remember when I was a much younger man, I used to race motocross. I used to race dirt bikes. And I loved it. And I got the aches and pains, man, big time to prove it now when I get out of bed. Aleve is my best friend going to bed, you know. It's like all those jumps and whoops. But I remember some of these guys back in that day, they would have these stickers on their bike that said, God is my co-pilot. And I used to think that was so cool. You know, wow, God is their co-pilot. You know, that's cool. I used to really think that was just the neatest thing. But the longer I walk through life, the more I came to the conclusion that that's really kind of a lousy message. God is my co-pilot? You know, I'm really thankful that God allows me to call him Father. He's my heavenly Father. I'm really grateful that he has adopted me into his family and that I'm a child of God through faith in Jesus. He's my Abba Daddy, that he has commissioned me to be an ambassador for Christ, a representative for Jesus in this world, that I can enter into God's presence because of Christ and receive mercy and grace in my time of need. But at the end of the day, we are not equals. God, I'm blessed that he calls us friends through faith in Jesus, but it's not like we're buds in that sense that I get to tell him how to run his deal. You know, I don't advise God. At the end of the day, he is Lord, and I am his servant. And Mary understood this so well. And so it was much simpler for her to say yes to what God was calling her to. The word servant here, it's a really cool word. I am the Lord's servant. The Greek word is doule, or doule. That's a good pronunciation. It literally means bondservant or bondslave. If you don't know what a bondslave is, there's a cool story behind it. In the first century, of course, there were slaves. And occasionally a master, many masters, were very kind and wonderful to their slaves. And occasionally a master would set a slave free and grant them their freedom. But the slave in return, because they loved the master, would take their freedom and say, thank you for setting me free. Now I want to use my freedom not for myself, but to serve you. Not because I have to, but because I want to. I am your bond slave. And they would sometimes be branded or marked in some way or pierced, sometimes in their ear, to mark them as this bond slave. And that's what Mary's saying. Thank you that I'm free to make this choice, but I choose to use that freedom to serve you. Galatians chapter 5, verses 13 and 14. Here's where Paul talks about this. He says, you brothers and sisters, you are called to be free. Jesus set us free from sin and death and separation from God and hell and fear of those things. But Paul says, don't use your freedom to indulge the flesh, your sin nature. Don't take your freedom and go run amok. But rather, serve one another in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Wonderful. See, Mary was able to stand there in the presence of Gabriel and hear this unbelievable, unimaginable announcement that she was going to be. It was God's destiny for her. It was his call in her life to be the earthly mother of the Son of God and to walk through all that would entail. She had no idea what the next day would bring. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but it was a simple decision for her because she understood. I'm a bondslave of the Lord. I'm his. I belong to him. I love him. My life is all about honoring him. It's not about anybody else. And so then we come down and we need to personalize this question for ourselves. Will I embrace God's destiny for my life in terms of your marriage and the kind of husband you are, the kind of wife you are, and God's call on your life in that relationship, or if you're not married, just at work or at school or among your friends, as you live your life and use the talents and abilities and finances and life and breath that God has given you, are you able and willing and joyful about stepping into this role and say, Lord, I'm yours. I am the Lord's servant.